Hello, Avatar fans, and welcome to the next episode of the Avatar Online podcast. This is going to be episode 267 of our regular shows, and we're recording this on January 6th, 2024. This is the official podcast for the fan site avatarthelastairbender.online.com, and I'm going to be your main host, Morgan Airspeed Prime. Joining me on the podcast is Greg2B from the site.
What's up, everyone?
Excellent. So yes, this is the first podcast episode for 2024, and it will be just a pretty normal episode. As usual, we will discuss the recent news from the last couple of weeks, and then we will continue our rewatches for Avatar and Korra. This time out, we're going to be reviewing for Korra K210, K210, A New Spiritual Age, and for Avatar, we're going to be reviewing 206, The Blind Bandit. So we'll get to them a little later on. But we have news to talk about. So, first one is one that kind of started at the end of last year and has sort of finished up basically yesterday. And that is that for a while there, based on what one website had listed, it seemed like the Avatar Studios' first movie was delayed. Basically, it had said that the date had went from being the October 2025 date to being undated. The result of that, after everything, is that it turns out that this was a error on the website. A pretty unusual sequence of events led to them creating multiple pages related to multiple Avatar projects, but then when they deleted one of them, it automatically posted this update saying that the movie was undated, when it was actually just them clearing off an unneeded kind of project listing. But it's sorted out now. The October 10th 2025 date, it remains, and there's no real issue here. But there was definitely a little bit of worry for a while, for the kind of couple of weeks while this was kind of out there. And as usual, no official communication from Avatar Studios. And I think also the fact that something we'll talk about in a minute, another piece of news came up and it didn't kind of clarify anything, didn't help either. But what are your thoughts on this whole situation, and I suppose just where you're at with the date and Avatar Studios at the moment?
Yeah, I saw when that was happening in, I guess, sort of real time and everything, and it was interesting to follow. I think just as part of being in this, community and stuff, we're unfortunately aware of, dates can change, and not that it's just Avatar projects, it's like all media projects in general. These days have issues with, dates being locked down and other, outside forces affecting when they're actually going to be produced. And again, for this movie, we know it's in, some form of production, but it's still, early days in terms of it actually coming out. So, the fact that it's having a moving target, almost wouldn't surprise us at this point. But I guess it's just, not something you want to see when, you've been looking forward to this for a while and, other dates have been put out. So I'm glad that they did get it cleared up. And, those type of errors on websites and how they function is, is pretty common. It just happens to be that this project has many, many eyes on it. So it got noticed very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that is another part of it. It's just that I think you look at a lot of the other stuff surrounding Avatar Studios, and it felt like it still feels like, to a certain degree, that a date change might happen, just because the layoffs that we talked about a couple of months back, entertainment industry is in a little bit of chaos. Other movies have actual confirmed release date changes in or around the Avatar movie, including other Paramount movies. So that's probably the biggest thing that probably tells you that don't be surprised if it does actually get a release date change, but the whole undated thing is not actually the case. So that's out of the way. But like I mentioned, there was this came out in sort of the middle of all of this, and we finally, and we've been talking about this for ages, me on my YouTube channel, here on the podcast, Avatar Studios' official website finally went up, was found. It's a bit of a kind of weird situation with this, where I think some people checked it up and apparently it's been live since November. I'm not really sure about what stage of the process that necessarily was referring to, but people only found it basically within the last week. And so it's up. it doesn't say like under construction or anything like that, but none of the official like social media channels or anything like that have a link to the website anywhere yet, though the website has a link to them. So it's hard to say where we're really at with this in terms of like it's public, but they haven't properly like launched it in terms of making a big deal about it. And I think it is a little bit of a big deal, just because it's an official Avatar thing that says Avatar Studios, and for a lot of people, this is the only thing that really makes it feel real, because like the social media accounts never post about Avatar Studios stuff. So yeah, that's what we have. And what is the site in its kind of current iteration? And it's not really much. Like I said, it's a bunch of links to their social media channels. So like Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, I think they have somewhere on there. Other than that, like they link to Braving the Elements podcast. That's cool. They link to specifically Barnes and Noble, so you can buy the latest Yang Chen book, and kind of bits and pieces like that to stream Avatar and Korra on Paramount Plus. They do link also to the concert website for Avatar in Concert. And the thing that probably people are most kind of surprised by, there is a link to Steam for Quest for Balance, which is a bit crazy as well. And also Avatar Legend. So they link a lot of the recent projects, but there's nothing about the comics. There's nothing about stuff that's like upcoming or coming soon. And given that the website is literally Avatar Studios official, nowhere on the website says what Avatar Studios is, or that there are upcoming animated projects happening at all. They don't have like an About Us page or anything like that. The only other features then would be they do offer you the chance to sign up for a newsletter for apparently exclusive content and updates about Avatar. Though when you actually do it, it's just like a Paramount email listing that has like Avatar pre-ticked. Because you get an email saying like, go into this thing and choose your preferences, and you can add in like updates about other stuff like say Sonic 3 or other Paramount projects. So it's not a specific Avatar email list, though I guess if you just leave it as is, you will only get Avatar updates. We'll see what happens because we haven't got an update yet. And then the final thing that's on the website is a very basic, like, what bending element would you be? It's a very basic personality test. We'll go through that in a second. But in general, Greg, what are your first impressions of the official Avatar Studios website we've been waiting so long for?
Yeah, I guess we have been talking about this for quite a while now at this point, and we did get it. I mean, as far as like, the website and stuff, I mean, it feels just sort of like, your generic, Nickelodeon website landing type page. Is not necessarily feels like it's like a studio page, which, again, is just a whole sort of odd thing of how Avatar Studios, in general is working underneath Nickelodeon, underneath the Paramount brand, and, et cetera, down the chain as far as how that goes. So I definitely can understand why, it feels kind of like it's lacking things and it's linking to things that you wouldn't necessarily think it might be. But I don't know. It feels like these are, I guess they're trying to say that these are like the most like official Avatar Studio projects compared to say like, all the comics that have been done before, which technically weren't done underneath Avatar Studios, but they were done under Nickelodeon, of course, along with any of the other projects as well. So I don't know, maybe they're ramping up to actually put it out. Maybe this page is still sort of in, sort of public, early release access type thing. So, it's there, but it's not really on the level of being ready to be promoted and stuff. And they're still trying to get, Avatar Studios stuff together overall before they really do like a full launch of the website. No, maybe this is just a soft launch and people have just sort of found it at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's something, and at least it links people, so you can at least, tell people if you want to find out stuff about Avatar, you can go here, and it definitely, links you to it.
Yeah, I think probably the weirdest thing is that, like, okay, they have Legacy of Yang Chen, and it's like not even a page for the Azula comic, which is it came out after Yang Chen and stuff like that. That's a bit odd. And I think I suppose it's more the idea that, like, even if you go into the little menu thing, like there isn't even like the like blank link for a news section. Now it can always get added in, I suppose, but right now I'm not sure how obviously set up for it to be potentially like a mega source of news it's maybe going to be, especially compared to other franchise websites. Like the hope that they might have some sort of like a kind of data section or like info section, not really kind of there right now. As for the bending quiz, I suppose we should probably talk about that a little bit. So just kind of going through it really quickly. When you click into it, it just asks for your name initially. Now, all it does with your name is that at the end, when you get your result, it does generate a little kind of like image that actually has your name in it, which is actually a nice little feature. So that's kind of cool. Well, the first question is just, who's your favorite avatar? And it's Aang, Roku, Korra, or Kyoshi, which already I think is like a little bit of a problem question, because it's like, what does this relate to? Like, what element you would be that like your personal favorite character doesn't necessarily match like what you are deep down as a bender type thing, especially when like not all of these avatars necessarily perfectly represent your typical air, fire, water, earth bender. So this is not really the style of question I think you'd want. And also most of the questions are like this, where there are 4 options, and it is so clear that, oh, I wonder what I get points towards if I click Aang, and so on. Second question is, it's dinner time, pick your ideal meal. And again, 4 options: spicy dish, hearty banquet, seafood feast, vegetarian delight. And again, if you know anything about Avatar, you know like, the stereotypical kind of meals of each nation: spicy for Fire Nation, seafood for Water Tribe, vegetarian for Air, hearty banquet for Earth. Okay, fair enough. You know, your food taste, I guess, is important in terms of choosing your bending discipline. Then you get pick an animal to be your companion, and it's polar bear dog, badger mole, dragon, flying bison. So it's the bending animals, and then because water doesn't fully have one, polar bear dog. Very kind of clear cut. This one at least I feel is sort of like, okay, I get it. Your home nation animal is going to be probably something you're a little bit more in line with. Fair enough. And then the next one is to win a fight, what approach do you take? And literally it is just the kind of line for line description of the stereotypical approach of each bending discipline. So air, evade, defend, neutralize non-violently. We have earthbending, stand your ground, block attacks, and use all your strength. Firebending, heavy offense, keep moving, dodge while attacking. And waterbending, counter-strike instead of initiate, then use their force against them. So that is fine. I just think that's a question that probably should be split up a little bit more among less obvious questions. And then the final question actually changes it up a little bit, and I feel like much more of the questions should be like this one. How do you process your emotions? And there's just 2 answers: openly and passionately, and calmly and introspectively. And I think based on like little bits and pieces that people have done on this, it seems like they've split this up into basically, I think it's air and earth, I think, are in calmly and introspectively, and then water and fire are for openly and passionately, which I think roughly makes sense. But it does seem like it's this kind of like mixed one where it's not just completely down one direction. And then when you click that, you do get your answer, and they do give you a little bit of a blurb about, like in this case going through it, I got airbender. It's pretty basic stuff. It just says you're an airbender, light as a breeze, you embody the essence of an airbender. Curiosity, open-mindedness fuel your flexible nature, like the ever-shifting winds. In airbending, you exude boundless creativity, adaptability, and limitless dreams. And then you get this shareable image, which is, as I said, the cool bit, where your name is put on this kind of image that has that description, and it links basically back to the website if you want to do it yourself. And they do then give you the opportunity to just look at like, oh, here's what the description is for the other nations as well. So you get to see those descriptions also. I wish it was a little bit more detailed. Like, I think there could have been an opportunity to really have a proper page about each of these elements. I just feel the quiz should be at least a couple of questions longer, and maybe not as blunt with so many of the answers as it actually is. But what are your thoughts on this? The official bending quiz that I know a lot of people have wanted them to do for quite a while.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't know. It's like you said, it's very sort of apparent what they're sort of going for. It doesn't really feel. I mean, I don't know. I guess if you're a fan of the show, like even if they did try to like dress it up in some sort of way, you probably would be able to game it regardless. But this does feel like it's even like it's hard to even like turn it off to try to not game it, because I tried to do that the first time. I was like, I'm gonna do this like the way intended without trying to like game it exactly to get what I want. No, and I still knew what I was going to get at the end. So it's like, unless you really do like a good job of picking ones that are like counter to each other, which is what I tried to do when we were just doing it right now, and I still was pretty sure what I was going to get, and I got Earthbender this time. So it's not really like that sort of curious what it's really going to be. But I mean, it's a fun thing. They have it on there. I would like if they could make a little bit more sort of like, I don't know, in depth with the questions that they're going to ask, because the show itself does have like a lot of depth. That's the reason why a lot of us like watching it and stuff and keep talking about it. So I think if they could channel a bit more of that and less of the sort of lowest common denominator for the kids part of it, that might be fun to go. But I'm sure they know their audience more than anyone else at this point, so maybe they did it for that way for a reason.
Yeah, like because I think what people want this to be like is, I think is it Pottermore, the official Harry Potter website, has like a proper sorting hat
Yeah,
quiz.
I've done that one too.
And
yeah,
I did it. I think I did it like ages ago. I don't know what it's like more recently, but like it's pretty detailed. It's maybe not the most detailed one I've ever seen, but like it's not super obvious. But like you say, if you do take the time to think about it, you can probably guarantee which exact way you're going. But the questions are not like so blatant like this one is. And like you can go like even more in depth. Like I know myself, like I read like Brandon Sanderson books. On his website he has a quiz for like Knights Radiant orders for Stormlight Archive. That is a really detailed one with like sliders, and it's got like 50 plus questions, but it's actually a really detailed thing. And I believe at the time there was actually like new lore in the descriptions and stuff like that. That's a cool way to do it. This I think just needs to be a little bit more put a little bit more added in. But otherwise, the main thing with the website is just that the hope, and I think most people have this hope to some degree, is just that we finally have the website. Avatar Studios is beginning to feel more and more real. The hope is just that there's an update, whether we get an email update sooner rather than later, or they actually just turn the website into whatever it's meant to be for its launch sooner rather than later. Add in the news section, something like that, that just makes it feel a little bit clearer. An About Us section. That's really all we want at this point. Something to just show a sign that you care about the fans, and it's not just endless waiting. That's the point here. And I suppose while we're here, we should probably discuss like when do we maybe expect to see the first update on Avatar Studios. With the release date scare gone, our expectations are back to where they were before that. So pretty much any of the major events, like Paramount events, you would expect them to have Avatar as part of their lineup of content coming up at some point, because we're in the year before it's meant to come out, like it should be listed there somewhere. And then again, we're talking about the Comic Cons, SDCC and NYCC, especially NYCC being exactly like a year ahead of time. That's a big one. And then stuff like, CinemaCon. While it wasn't public, the image did leak out, and they posted the date again in tandem with that. Any of these events is an opportunity to get more stuff on this. Plus, also, you would assume Netflix Avatar is going to be huge. It'd be a little weird if Avatar Studios didn't maybe have anything to say in the week or two following the release, just to take advantage, put Avatar, other projects in other people's minds. So that kind of adds into it. You'd think they'd want to say something there. They do have Braving the Elements is starting again this month, season 3. They have a live show as well that they're doing at the end of the month. that might be an opportunity to do something, depending on what that opening episode is. There's a lot of chances to talk. It's just, will they, based on kind of the prior record. But where are you at with, when do you expect the next piece of news about this?
It's a good question. I mean, as of now, with them so, assumingly deep into production, I don't know. A lot of those, events that you just sort of listed feel like they're almost too early for them to really say anything. I mean, I'm sure they might get some mentions, like, if they do an investors thing, I'm sure it'll get mentioned just because, you have to keep the investors happy with what's going on and stuff like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it gets mentions there. As far as like the different cons, I mean, SCC would be cool. Some of the cinema cons or any of the other sort of movie festival type places, events, those, in theory would be good ones, but I don't know. It feels like they're still trying to hold things really close to, the actual sort of productions and stuff. That I almost wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear anything until like, they're ready to start actually like promoting and marketing the movie for real rather than sort of, the pre-pro type of stuff, which is what we're into now. Because I don't know, especially sort of like with movies and stuff like that, like, yes, some of them do sort of give you like sort of the behind the scenes stuff and along those lines, but usually it's not until they're ready to actually do stuff in terms of movies go. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't have like, if it doesn't go the route of like, Netflix Avatar where, we've started to get like, screenshots and set images and sort of, stuff from the cast and the crew along those sort of lines, those sort of like interviews. I'd be surprised if we start getting those anytime soon, honestly, as far as that goes, especially with it being more, I don't know, it feels like it's going the more sort of like traditional route and sort of the production rather than sort of the new age where we start getting some stuff, via the fandom and stuff like that. But, who's say that they won't do that, considering I'm sure they're aware of the media landscape right now. So I hope they do some stuff sooner, but I don't know. I wouldn't particularly expect any of that, very soon.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I think I would actually really want, and I think it'd probably be helpful for them, would just be, like, surely at this point they have a title for the movie, and I think that's what needs to be clarified, because that's kind of to a certain degree what caused the issue on the website that we just talked about, was the whole idea of we're talking about these working titles and the fact that there's a Netflix Avatar show, and then there's actually theoretically multiple Avatar movies, animated ones, and it just gets really confusing because it's like untitled animated Aang Avatar movie, not Avatar Aang movie, Aang Avatar movie. What? And then it's Avatar Studios, not just Avatar official website, and all of this stuff. That would be nice to get. And then I just think any visual, like, I would like to be able to feel like I can more confidently talk about that image that kind of came out, leaked. I think most people are fine with posting it these days, but I'd like an official image put out, just to be like, hey, this is what we're working on. We know it's been like 3 years. It's still going to be a little bit more time, but it's going to be called this. This is what it is. We'll tell you when we have more. At this point, that's all I think most people want, is just, hey, we exist. It's real. We know you're waiting. Just Mike and Brian, say something, please. So we'll see what happens. Again, like I said, there's a bunch of opportunities. How many of them they'll take, I'm not sure. But I think, like we've been saying most of last year, I'd be very surprised if we did get to like New York Comic Con this year. Especially if we haven't had any sort of like confirmed release date change. If it's still October 2025 going into October 2024, then I kind of feel like we probably should have some expectations that like a year beforehand, and keeping in mind that usually like, the December then, like November, December, January are usually relatively slow for this sort of thing. It's probably looking at like, February by the time you get going again to maybe more accurately talk about it. Who knows what exact way it's going to go, but yeah, we just hope for news. That's the basic idea. Other bits of information, Netflix Avatar. We have had quite a few smaller updates. Nothing big like a trailer, but we've seen a bunch of new screenshots, including a group of new character images. So we now have an image of Gran Gran, Suki's mother, Mayor Yukari, the Mechanist, Jet, June, and then there was like two or three images of like Aang, Katara, Sokka. One image that just came out a few days ago of Aang that kind of has a close-up of his staff. So you wouldn't say anything huge, but they're doing like just enough to keep it in people's minds ahead of the trailer, the proper trailer, which we're probably expecting in the next like 2-3 weeks. Because it seems like for sure, with about a month to go, we'll probably have that trailer. So we're getting pretty close to the show dropping, because it's February 22nd. The trailer based on Netflix One Piece was like 5 weeks beforehand. So next 2-3 weeks is when this is all going to kick off. But what we have from the last few weeks is, like I said, more screenshots. What are your thoughts on any of this? Does any of this stand out to you, or are you still, like most of us, waiting for like the trailer and the release?
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely still waiting for the trailer and the release. I mean, the screenshots that they shared are like the best versions of everything. I mean, they look cool, nice cinematic, depth of field, blur on the background and everything like that. So like they look good in the stills and everything like that. So as far as the images go, they're cool. It looks like, what more could you really want for as of now? It's really just to see how everything works in tandem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like based on fan reaction, everyone is like thinks that like they like absolutely got like June like 100% correct. Like the casting has been like and the outfit is like spot on there. Obviously, interestingly, we don't even know exactly how they're going to use June within the kind of body of the show, because like, okay, she's going to be the bounty hunter. The core of how she was used in her episode is probably going to be the case, but probably in a slightly different position is the idea here. Otherwise, yeah, I think most people are liking what they've seen so far. Nothing crazy. We just want to see some actual stuff here. I want to see some clips. I want to see some dialogue, some complete scenes. So I want that trailer and I want the release. That's where I'm at right now. I'm kind of a little bit done with like just seeing the odd screenshot here and there. It's like, it's an adaptation. Show me what you've done, basically. That's where I'm at. Because otherwise I'm relatively excited going in. Hopefully the trailer is the thing to take it to the absolute next level. But do you have any thoughts on specifically when you think the trailer is going to be?
Question. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think your idea of it coming in the next couple of weeks sounds like it would be good, but I don't know. I feel like it might be on sort of the later end of that, rather than on the earlier side in terms of when they're actually going to show it off and stuff like that. But who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's for sure like the Netflix don't ever tend to usually like massively switch up how they do their marketing, so it's always going to be relatively close but not too far away. So like it's all going to be within a couple of week period when it all happens. It's just the way they do things. On my channel, I have been having a little bit more of a discussion in some of my videos about like, hey, we basically know it's going to be all 8 episodes at once. Like, how do you feel about that? And it was interesting to see some of the like kind of mixed reaction there. Given my channel and like the focus and stuff like that on fan discussion, I think most people would prefer a split up release schedule, so we have a bit of time to discuss it. But there was still definitely some people who like the binge watch kind of format. But what are your thoughts on that? Just we'll have all 8 episodes on the same day. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I saw that. That was a good point to bring up. I don't know. I've grown up with sort of the traditional sort of model of, an episode a week and sort of that process. But, with the way things are going now and, sort of people wanting to be able to control and consume it at their own speed, whether that's, all in one go over like a long weekend or one day, I guess, maybe, or, just sort of on their own sort of pace. I think, I could see the merits in both. I mean, I think, in terms of like interacting with people, if that's really what you're aiming for with this, the once a week is, obviously the sort of better one from my perspective in terms of that. Maybe 2 could work with that as well. But, I think, it'll be interesting to see how this actually goes with it being put out there and how much you choose to sort of interact with this, fandom and how this is, going to be part of one that's already there, as well as, I'm sure it's going to make sort of like its own, fandom of people who've only seen this and
Mm.
haven't seen the original one as well. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that's sort of perceived and how that's sort of, taken there. I mean, I think, I'll probably, watch it over a course of a period of time, depending on, if we talk about it and stuff for the podcast and whatnot. So I don't know. I guess I'm never really I don't feel sort of as compelled to sort of force watch shows as I once did back in the day. But no, it'll still be interesting to see how everything goes in the fallout of things.
Mm. Yeah, and that's the thing for me, like kind of trying to make videos, and it does feel like I have to at least rush like a little bit to do something on the first day, because it just feels like, what am I doing if I don't put something out day one to cover some part of the show? But yeah, it does make it very complicated, because it's going to be like in or around 8 hours of content dropped all at once after all of this build up, and it's like, how on earth are we going to do this? Especially like the podcasts, and like like me trying to also do videos and stuff like that. It's a bit of a daunting prospect in that sense, and that's why in my video I just talked about how like I'd be pretty okay with just like anything that slightly extends out the kind of release window, even if it's like 4 episodes, week break, 4 episodes. I think that would be relatively fine as well. Other people came in and then added in, like, I think Marvel What If, their recent season, they did it over the course of like pretty much an episode a day. Maybe they skipped one here or there to release the whole season. Something like that I think would also be pretty good, just to give a little bit more breathing room to allow for the fan discussion. And it sort of gets into like the Netflix philosophy of like, from their perspective, they probably mainly only focus on the numbers, because other streaming platforms do still do it weekly. They probably are going to get like mega numbers the first few days, for like the first week or two. But from a fandom perspective, and maybe for the future kind of maximizing things, maybe they should kind of separate it out a little. That like there's a time and a place for each release format, basically. And because Avatar has a built-in established fandom, maybe they should kind of consider that in. But it'll be fine. We'll all get through eventually. And then we still don't know exactly how good or not it's going to be. Where if it is really good, maybe we wish we had more time to kind of savor it. If it turns out to have its own kind of major problems, maybe it's best that we see it all at once. But we'll have to wait and see on that. So that's Netflix. Like I said, there was other little bits and pieces with interview stuff, but the main thing that seems to just be being presented in some of the interviews with the showrunner is just the idea of there will be changes. They're still trying to make it as accurate as possible, but because it's a different kind of format, they have 8 episodes instead of 20. They're going to be an hour long instead of 22 minutes. They're going to be some changes to how things kind of exactly play out. Now, I do wish in some of these cases he could give an example of that, so we had a better sense for what's going on. Because right now we mainly have kind of rumored information, and then just like, hey, here's Mayor Yukari. What's going on there? Like, what does that mean? What does that change mean? Is this just a straight up like swap with Oyaji? So like no Oyaji in the show, replaced by Yukari, and let's give Suki something else. She's her mother. Like, is it as simple as that, and we'll see sort of similar stuff across the board? Who knows? But that'll be the interesting thing to keep track of. In terms of final pieces of news, I'll just mention this one here. The June Iroh comic, so The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, has been delayed again. I checked to make sure that like this is not a repeat, but no. On the last podcast we talked about the delay. There is a new delay. So this one means the comic is now coming out July 2nd/3rd for mass market and comic book stores. So this is an entire month delay from, I think it was June 4th and 5th to July 2nd and 3rd. So like 4 whole entire weeks. Not sure what the situation is here. The hope here is just that this sliding eventually stops. We have not, I don't believe, got solicitations yet for January, so we don't know if there will be a delay or any updates on publishing. for stuff this month just yet. That might be next week or the week after. So we'll have to wait and see. But for now, it's July 2nd and 3rd. So into the entire second half of the year. Not great to see. This is now the second proper delay for this book. Any thoughts on this? I thought we were past a lot of these really consistent release date delays, but any thoughts on this?
No, it seems like we can not escape sort of the sliding time scale of, releases either in any sort of media format at this point. Yes. I don't know. It's quite unfortunate because it was, even though it's one of the books that people are like, they didn't sort of expect it. It was still, something that was coming out that, had some interest behind it. So to see a delay, it doesn't really speak positive of things moving forward.
Yeah. And then with regards to the Mako comic, we still have no date. That's why, I'm looking out for January solicitations just to see if it gets included there when we finally see the release schedule for that book, because I'm assuming it's a 2024 book, because I'd be really shocked if it doesn't quite make the year. But if it gets announced for December, who's to say it doesn't get delayed out of the year? That's the kind of fear that we have. So we're waiting to see when that actually gets properly solicited, because that will also bring along with it the description for the book, which we're very eager to see what it's exactly about based on the cover. But yeah, that's the news. Hopefully there'll be more later on in the month. Potentially, of course, the Netflix trailer. And who knows if that could bring a lot of other Avatar news along with it, because Avatar is going to be all over the place come the end of February. So we'll see what happens. So we'll get into our reviews for the episode. We're actually going to start with Korra this time out. So like I said, we're going to be reviewing here K210, A New Spiritual Age. So with the format that Book 2 Spirits has, this is the last episode before the finale, because Book 2 has a 4-part finale, at least in terms of how they aired it, at least. You could maybe make an argument for 211 not quite being part of the finale exactly, because of course 12 is harmonic convergence itself, but it's a pretty long finale because of just how crazy the whole sequence is. But for now, we're discussing A New Spiritual Age. So we'll get into overall thoughts first, and then we'll go through it. So Greg, overall, what are your thoughts on A New Spiritual Age?
This was a cool one. I think, after sort of the build up of, trying to figure out how to get into the spirit world and sort of trying to sort of understand things with, that sort of aspect of Korra, to actually get there, to actually get to experience this place firsthand by our characters. I thought that was a really good showing of it, and sort of the pitfalls and the dangers that sort of, revolve around, exploring this new place, and, Korra coming, slowly to sort of understand this side of her character, her being, that, she's, never really had, that much sort of experience with at all. That's the one thing that she, can't really do that well, sort of the more meditative, contemplative type of stuff. So it was cool to see her, actually explore this side, get to see some old characters that we haven't sort of seen before. And to see how that all plays out, and I always remember this one for the cliffhanger ending at the end as well. So I think this is a cool one.
Yeah, this is a very good episode. I think for a lot of people with Book 2, of course, we've discussed over the months here that it's not as well regarded by the fandom, but there tends to be some level of respect given towards beginnings, and this episode in particular. In part mainly because it's the Iroh episode, but I think it's good for a variety of reasons. Like you say, just seeing Korra experience the spirit world, and the contrast with how Jinora, who's also never been in here either, is much more comfortable than Korra, who's the Avatar, and that's an interesting kind of dynamic. It gives us, I think so far, our best proper look at the spirit world, because we do go on a bit of a journey. We get to see different kind of locations, interactions in the spirit world, to just get a sense of how it works, rather than we're in this specific section for this moment and you won't see how exactly it all works. Korra learns some really strong lessons about how it works, of course, balance to a certain degree. Jinora, of course, gets some time to shine here, going on her own journey, Iroh, Wan Shi Tong, like memorable characters. And like you said, it leads up to a big cliffhanger highlighting that like we're in finale time for book 2. We're building up to that, and so much of the information here is quite important for what we're dealing with. But let's get to going through the episode here. So yeah, we'll just kind of sort of start at the start. There's a quick scene of Tenzin showing how much he's worried for Jinora, because he has to stay behind, he has to have faith in her, but he is very worried. And there's some little bits of banter between Tenzin and his siblings, which is nice. But we mainly open the episode with, yes, the reaction to the spirit world for the first time. Korra, quite apprehensive, very cautious moving around here, given the little bits and pieces she knows from like her like beginnings kind of journey so far. Whereas Jinora is just perfectly comfortable, like going around the place, interacting with spirits. And inevitably, of course, Korra, the first spirit she properly encounters, there's an argument that happens. Admittedly, I think the spirits here are a little bit like overwhelming here for her, but she doesn't help things by trying to bend, even though that she doesn't have her bending, and they actually end up going dark. And I think one of the coolest parts of this in terms of how the spirit world work is definitely the idea that these kind of groundhog spirits basically stick onto Korra and then sink her into the ground, and they go through the ground into an ocean. And it just gives you like, this is how different the spirit world is, that the landscape is not exactly how you think it is based on the physical. So yeah, chaotic situation, as this is immediately Jinora and Korra separate. Jinora is meant to be Korra's guide, but Korra's gotten into trouble immediately. So what are your thoughts on the opening to the episode, split apart immediately?
Yeah, no, that is pretty typical for Korra's character, especially in the first 2 seasons of this show. Her just sort of running into trouble and trying to figure out some way out of it. And this is textbook example of that, of her just sort of and I mean, she has a guide, but Korra still has to like develop the mentality of sort of trying to understand this new world. And that's for her character, her you could say because of her sheltered upbringing, or whatever else has happened to her up until this point, that's not something that she's always the best sort of to deal with. I think by the end of the show she gets perfectly good at doing that and understanding, but this is still her in early days of her character sort of finding the way. So the fact that these spirits sort of and it almost feels like they don't turn like sort of super dark. They're just sort of like upset until they sort of start jumping on her. Then that feels pretty dark to me, even though the whole like environment isn't like super dark as it does later on in the episode. This is like mild level dark spirits, which is still, pretty upsetting for her as a character because of everything she has to go through. But, in the grand scheme of things, I suppose this is sort of the milder way of, things sort of happening to her. But yeah, the whole idea of the landscape sort of changing, I think, this whole episode does a really good job of that. There's a couple other, scenes where they do that specific whole sort of like foreshortening of the environment to show her at another location that I think is a really cool part of this episode. And I guess, that could only really be done in the spirit world. It's too bad because that's a pretty cool effect. But yeah, it's definitely a cool or an interesting sort of way to sort of start the episode off and just to get the ball rolling.
Because like it's interesting to kind of keep track of, if it's even possible to keep track of their location in the spirit world, where like they're in the kind of like meadow, light area of the spirit world. They go through the ground. They're basically in an ocean. A like Godzilla-like spirit like eats them. But inside that spirit, there's like flowing water currents where they get separated. And then somehow within the body of this spirit, in these water channels, they get transported then out to different sections of the spirit world. So it's like, what's happening here, especially when you combine this with the whole idea of like, your emotions effectively determine your reality in the spirit world. And like we learn in like book 3 and stuff like that, if you are super confident in the spirit world, you can just arrive wherever you are, kind of think, and arrive at your location like immediately, because you can just almost teleport like Zahir does. So is that happening here just in a negative sense, that like because Korra is super afraid, that's why she gets basically transported to a dark area of the spirit world. And then because Jinora is just a little bit like panicked, but she's overall comfortable, she ends up in just a different light area. It's an interesting one to kind of keep track of. But what were your thoughts on that? Just like the weird stuff, like the giant underwater spirit, and how exactly they get separated.
Yeah, no, I wonder if someone, I mean, I'm sure probably someone already did this, but there's like a map of the spirit world and how it like sort of interconnects and like sort of folds in over on itself. That would be interesting to see how that sort of, would work. I mean, like how would you, I don't know, like how do you navigate that in like sort of like, the trading card game and stuff like that? The concept there is pretty interesting. I guess I could go for any sort of type of spirit world as well, not just, the Avatar one. But yeah, no, the Godzilla creature is pretty interesting. I mean, it almost feels like that's, reminiscent of, another creature that she sort of had encountered with that was also a spirit. So I wonder if this is just sort of the more sort of, fleshed out version of that because she's actually in the spirit world versus out of it. But yeah, that's definitely, I mean, that seemed pretty like sort of harrowing in sort of the beginning, but the fact that they just sort of, it's just sort of like a method of their transportation sort of, it makes it pretty intriguing to see how that turns out. And yeah, it definitely feels like their emotions are controlling where they go, and that would be, the way. I mean, we've seen that with like other avatars who've gone to the spirit world, like, trying to get to like the Fog of Lost Souls or sort of any of the other sort of areas that we sort of are pseudo named at least, like Ko and stuff like that. Like if you have the means and the understanding, you definitely can, get there quicker rather than if you were to just sort of walk around aimlessly, or you just get a random guide that sort of takes you there pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then a lot of times, yeah, when we see people meditate into the spirit world, if you have a goal in mind, you go like basically immediately there. So yeah, we've seen that a lot. So yeah, Korra ends up in a pretty dark and dreary area of the spirit world. There's a bunch of dark spirits kind of around her, but not all of them are dark. Or at least Korra, in this very frightened state, very much interprets them as being dark spirits, even if they're not actually officially in a dark form. Because, like, there are spirits where it's like, is Ko in a dark form? And for really powerful spirits, like, do they even fully have that whole situation going on? It's an interesting one. But either way, she runs from these spirits and ends up basically changing into a younger version of herself. And she's crying. So this is very much the idea of, because she's so uncomfortable here, she imagines it like she is a young child who really doesn't have any control over the situation. That's her perception of herself in the spirit world, absolutely lost here in all of this. And this is definitely a cool, thing in the episode to just really highlight that this is this learning process that Korra has to learn to be comfortable in the spirit world, because that's part of being the Avatar, and this is this lesson that she has to go on here. But yeah, what are your thoughts on this turn of events here? We get young Korra for most of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was a nice, change of pace. It's a cute aspect, and everyone sort of, makes note of, that being her introduction and liking that sort of character design. So to see them, bring it back here, it's nice, and, it helps illustrate the point of her sort of unease, her sort of, this sort of general, just sort of, not feeling comfortable with the situation at all. And, being, I guess, it makes it seem like she would be more willing to take, information from an elder on sort of the state of things in the spirit world, compared to if she was her normal sort of like teenage self, sort of, rebellious, nature that we're sort of always, claiming that Korra has to the umpteenth level. So I think, from that, perspective, it was a good choice for them to sort of write that into the story that way.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Jinora ends up in a light area of the spirit world and meets Furryfoot, who she knows. Interestingly, he's like 10 times as big in the spirit world as the physical world, which is an interesting dynamic. And he's really friendly. He immediately lets kind of Jinora hop on his back, and he's going to guide her to where she needs to go, which is she wants to find Korra and information on the spirit portals. And so we find out that Furryfoot is guiding her to Wan Shi Tong's library, which of course last time we saw it was being sucked back into the spirit world by Wan Shi Tong. And so this is where we find out that, like, okay, so middle of the, like, Siwang desert in the physical world goes to, like, upside down, trapped in vines in this, like, crazy spirit valley thing. It's a really interesting location and kind of visual thing of, like, the library's upside down, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't, like, do anything because physics don't work the same here, I guess. So a massive contrast between the result of the kind of splitting apart for Korra and Jinora. But what are your thoughts on this for Jinora?
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. I think that was like a highlight moment for many people, seeing, you know, the library still there, still exists, and, you know, just sort of how, like you say, like, physics don't really matter. I mean, the fact that it's upside down, held by vines, you know, is a moot point in terms of how things work here. It does seem like it at least has, like, sort of like a pseudo sort of like static location that people sort of can come to if they know where it is, at least. But other than that, you know, it's there, you know, nothing's messed up or anything like that. But yeah, you know, it just seems like this would be, you know, sort of the perfect way for Jinora to sort of, you know, find out information, right? Like, she's always about, you know, talking about having read things and wanted to understand things. So, you know, the fact that, you know, her guide leads her to the library of all places, you know, seems right on point.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, from there we then cut back to Korra, and this is where we get the introduction of the spirit bird. So we see a spirit bird flying towards Korra. She swats at it because she's scared and actually injures it. So we see it kind of like it has this kind of like gap in its wing because she hit it. She actually sees that this is not a dark spirit. It's still in a kind of light form. It is friendly ultimately, and she realizes she's made a mistake here. She wants to help it, and so she picks up the bird, kind of like, okay, I've got to make amends for this. But then we get the big moment. Iroh appears out of like absolutely nowhere and reveals that, like, hey, I knew Avatar Aang. It's nice to meet you, Korra. Basically, he's going to help her, and he brings her to the spirit tea party. So very cool moment here, reintroduction of Iroh, and obviously we know about like his connection to the spirit world, but it's like, oh, he's in the spirit world, like what's going on here? But also it's like, wait, Korra's 70 years on, he looks basically the same, what's going on here? There's confusion, it's cool, but like, what? And that was like, that's the reaction you have to have, just because it's like, wait, time, what's going on here? But what are your thoughts on this moment?
Yeah, that's why time is an illusion, right? But yeah, no, this is just, you know, sort of you know, this is Korra's actual guide, and I think, you know, in this sort of case here, you know, Korra is the type of character that needs like words and things to sort of be explained to her, like, you know, one-to-one, especially with her being sort of the you know, kid form of herself, or the reflection of herself. No, Iroh, as of, you know, any sort of, you know, character that we could think of in Avatar, would be like a great sort of guide. It is, you know, confusing, and, you know, it does take a little bit for them to sort of explain how that works. And, you know, it also gets like a couple extra jokes later on in the season or the show as well, which is nice to sort of see here. But yeah, I think, you know, I don't know, it's a nice callback. I think, you know, the fact that it's only done so much doesn't make it feel like it's too sort of, you know, playing off of the original, you know, sort of show and series here. Granted, it's not the only thing in this episode that's dealing with that sort of stuff, but I think it's different when you do have a character. But, you know, a lot of people like it, so clearly they didn't do it too wrong or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we do get the first part of this scene at the tea party. So we see that Iroh in the spirit world tends to hang out with this kind of group of spirits here, playing pai sho, eating spirit cake, and having tea the whole time. So it's like, it seems like the perfect life for him here. He has all these friends here, but one of the big things they focus on in this like initial part of the scene is that Korra notices what she refers to as my teapot, and it's actually Wan's teapot, the one that he carried Rava in at the end, heading into harmonic convergence. So a very cool little sequence here where we do get the whole there's still a little light in every cup when you have tea from Wan's teapot. So one of the, I think, the cooler like past Avatar connections that like still exist in the present Avatar kind of type things of like, oh yeah, you don't get too many of them. There's the whole Avatar relics thing, and this is sort of the reveal that, oh, I guess the teapot is the Avatar relic, the initial one. So I've always liked that little idea here. And again, it's the first kind of little bit of wisdom from Iroh about like the magic of tea here, especially from a notable teapot like this. But any thoughts on the first bit of the Spirit Tea Party?
Yeah, no, I think, using the teapot, which was used before, and having Iroh in it, I mean, I think that sort of makes the connection almost sort of worth it and sort of valid in a sense, because, we know that he's had that thing from back before. So, that's just good writing of them to sort of key that in with the character. And yeah, I think, the fact that she says, my teapot, that feels like a very sort of like young kid thing to say, since now we know sort of the backstory of the Avatar, we can see how that sort of applies and how that sort of has a deeper meaning. And yeah, it's cool to think of it as like sort of the original sort of Avatar relic, and sort of how that's like essentially like the spirit world's version of, sort of being able to sort of find the Avatar, right? Because they should be able to recognize that sort of instantly, or at least, be drawn to it in some sort of form and fashion, even if, the past sort of Avatars mostly kind of sort of like forgot about that sort of deeper connection because they didn't really need to have it. So it's a nice sort of, throwback that we didn't even really know was really going to be a thing.
Mm-hmm. I would love to know the story of how Iroh found the teapot, because he basically says like, this is the most impressive thing I found like in my entire time here, and it's like my prized possession that I actually found it. So that's cool. But we then cut over to, okay, Janora's in the library. We know who she's just about to meet, so we get the second sort of like fan favorite character reintroduction here. So yeah, Wan Shi Tong swoops down in the library, and yeah, notably they don't do any weird thing where the whole scene is upside down. It's just like, no, they're in there. Gravity, if that even exists in the spirit world, is normal. Yeah, he is his usual self here, as we would expect, where like he's anti-human because that's the way he was, because the gang betrayed him, basically. It is immediately noted Professor Zay is dead. We literally see his skeleton that they cut to straight away. Janora is aware of this, so that's interesting. And yeah, he doubles down on like, humans are not allowed in here anymore. She argues that like, the rules have always been that like, if I have knowledge to give you, I can come in. And he's like, how can someone as young as you have anything? Surely I know everything. I know more than you. She then goes on to explain, this is how radios work. Did you know that? And he's like, no, I was given misinformation on this topic. And we see one of the knowledge seekers has obviously presented that misinformation, which is that he thought Wan Shi Tong was told that there are little tiny men in the radios, and that's how it works, but it's not, of course. So she then mentions, like, he's still not really interested by this. He's like, okay, that's cool to know, but I still don't really do things that way. She then says that she came with the Avatar and she's hoping to find information about the spirit portals. And he immediately switches up and is like, okay, I'll let you look around. You came with the Avatar. That's great. And obviously this is one of those subtle things, because Wan Shi Tong isn't really in the episode too much. And you don't really get too much of a connection between this scene and his second scene. So just knowing that, like, yes, the whole time he's working for Unalaq. So he's kind of like, oh, Unalaq would like to know that you're here with the Avatar. I should stall you here and go get him. And that's how it all kind of comes about. But very, very fun scene. I like Janora getting to get a knowledge kind of advantage over Wan Shi Tong. Is a fun scene. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, that is fun, and that feels very in character for Janora, in order to sort of like, just sort of like info dump some knowledge that another character might not necessarily had. And Wan Shi Tong, as a lot of the older or more sort of powerful spirits, they try to make it seem like they sort of know everything, or have better knowledge of things. So this is a nice way, I guess, of seeing, the characters sort of put in their place, even though this is all sort of, them sort of manipulating the situation for, his own sort of, end goal here. And I don't know. I mean, I guess you could see why you would think that, oh, I came with the Avatar thing should be okay. But as we saw, just earlier in this episode, being the Avatar in the spirit world doesn't necessarily, make things okay. Not all the spirits are particularly, happy with what you've been doing. Just like all the people aren't necessarily happy with how the Avatar has been doing things. So I don't know. I think that's something that maybe now, the characters will have sort of the understanding that it's not, just because you are, who you say you are doesn't necessarily make things sort of the right way of being in sort of situations here. But it's definitely a nice sort of callback, just sort of seeing the library, seeing, Professor Zay, what sort of happened to him in the end result there. So it's definitely something to sort of keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. I like that they made the reference to Zay, even if it's not some weird thing where he somehow managed to survive, which I think was some of the speculation I had, maybe if we were to ever do this, is that he would be alive. He would have been the one to change Wan Shi Tong, but no, they haven't done that, but I at least like that they referenced it. But yeah, from there we get cut back to Iroh, and so this is where we get the explanation. Like, Korra asks, like, hey, what's going on here? How are you here? Explain. And he explains that he has been in the spirit world for many years, and that basically when his life was just about over in the physical world, he chose to leave his body behind at the end of his life and to live on as a spirit in the spirit world. He basically meditated into the spirit world close to death and just accepted that his body was going to die. And that's how we have Iroh here 70 years on, given that he was relatively old in Avatar. Admittedly, I don't think we know how old Iroh is, but make of that what you will. Still, it would make him like well over 100. And even though there's precedent for that, I don't think Iroh was like a Boomy-esque character in terms of like being that active at a crazy advanced age. But still, an interesting explanation. This obviously is helped by like extra information we had from like the comics at this point in time. I suppose we didn't quite know at the time the whole painted lady situation, but this is a good example of like the idea of like, oh yeah, there is this kind of duality with humans and spirits, that humans can decide to effectively become immortal by becoming a spirit, and in the comics we were presented with the other side of that spirits can actually choose to take on mortal forms as well. So it's a very interesting dynamic. I think most people would like to know a bit of detail about like him making this decision and how much he told people, because we later find out that Zuko didn't know that I was just in the spirit world as such. So he obviously did this partly in secret. I suppose it depends on exactly how you interpret it, but it's a interesting one about the end of Iroh's life as a human. So what are your thoughts on the explanation?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, as far as what we see, and especially with, the understanding that we have of the spirit world and how humans can interact with it and vice versa, it feels like it works in universe for how they're going about it. And, we know that Iroh, like we said before, we know Iroh has a spiritual sort of connection in general. So the fact that, he would be a character that could sort of do this sort of thing doesn't seem too far stretch, I think. I think, I don't know, it feels like the characters that would do this sort of things wouldn't necessarily be the ones that would sort of like share around or anything like that. Like, I wouldn't be surprised, like, I'm not surprised that Zuko doesn't notice. Even though, you would think that, Zuko would, jump at the chance to see sort of, Iroh in another life in any sort of form. No, Iroh probably wouldn't want, like his, nephew to sort of like dependent on that sort of idea or anything like that. And, as far as we know, Zuko's not necessarily a most, spiritually in tune character. So, the fact that he would even sort of consider this as a thing that, someone could do, that doesn't surprise me, but I don't know. Maybe maybe Zuko becomes slightly more spiritual, past what we've seen him here. I don't know. I would still kind of doubt that, but no, I think it's a cool thing to have Iroh there and that sort of connection, and another named character that becomes a spirit, and sort of how they interact with the world. I wouldn't expect to see Iroh do anything like General Old Iron, or Lady Tian Hai, or Painted Lady, or anything sort of along those lines. But I don't know. Maybe he'll just be like the T spirit, and that'll just be his role or something like that. I don't know. They could do something fun with that in the future.
Yeah, because that's the thing of like, he says he's been here many years, so we have to assume that that's probably like 30, maybe 40 years, so, give or take, something along those lines. There's no particular change that makes him come across as like his form has changed to become more spiritual in some way. The assumption probably would be that like over like hundreds, thousands of years, he probably will change in form to some degree, and maybe look a little bit less like obviously human. Sort of in the same way that like, the Painted Lady is still very, very humanoid, but there's slight elements where you can tell like, oh, like it's not just blatantly like obvious that it's just a human. So that'll be an interesting thing to keep track of. But yeah, I assume with Iroh not telling anyone, it probably is a case of like sort of important sacred knowledge, like alerting someone to the fact that like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this like secret technique that basically makes you like immortal. There's also sort of the danger factor of like giving people that hope of like, oh yeah, you can see me at any point if you just go to the spirit world, but if they're not prepared correctly to go to the spirit world, that could put people at risk, especially from stuff like the Fog of Lost Souls. So I'm assuming those are all factors in the... Still, I'd like to know what his exact logic, if like say Zuko does ever go through the portals to go into the spirit world to see him, how that would work. But anyway, so we're back with Korra here in this next scene, and she gets very upset here, and this actually does turn the spirits. It begins to turn them dark. The area around them begins to kind of turn into a kind of storm. The clouds kind of come over. Darkness is kind of arriving. Iroh does manage to calm her down, but like it causes a bit of a scene here at the tea party. This is where the full-on explanation of like, yes, your emotions become your reality, especially so since she's the Avatar, so that's the sort of explanation behind why so much is changing, and the sort of sheer power that the Avatar seems to have here in the spirit world is that they can actually greatly change the spirit world. So that's an interesting one. She apologizes and things go back to kind of normal. Iroh then suggests, when it comes to like what she should do going forward, is that helping another will kind of help you help yourself, basically. And so why don't you help the injured bird spirit get back to its family? I think that will help you to find your way. So he's just on the verge of kind of sending her off on her journey. That's going to be the kind of the key kind of learning in the spirit world here. So pretty nice stuff here. But yes, this is the main light, dark emotions explanation. Any thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I think this is like the nice trope of, helping others can also help yourself along the way. And, for her character at this time, I think that's the best way that she can go about sort of understanding things, especially after, she realizes how much of effect that she has on the environment here. I think this is like the first real instance of her sort of being able to sort of grasp that sort of concept.
Mm-hmm. We switch back over to Jinora, and she's struggling to find the information she wants, so she just asks a knowledge seeker, is there a book with any information on the spirit portals? One is handed to her, of course, an old book, and it just explains basically that, like, the ancients said that as long as the portals are closed, Vatu will remain in his prison in the Tree of Time, and the battle at harmonic convergence will be avoided. It doesn't need to happen. There's not enough power for him to free himself. It then goes on to explain, but if the portals are open when harmonic convergence happens, that will give Vatu enough power to break free of his prison, and the battle will need to be fought. So this is the kind of core dynamic here in terms of like why there is such a rush here and technical reason for why it is important that Korra correct the idea of, yeah, I probably need to shut the portal so that we stop this from happening. But then she has the information she wants. She is confronted by Unalaq and Wan Shi Tong, and the reveal that they're working together. She's very shocked that he is working with Unalaq, but he just says that basically Unalaq has proven himself to be a friend to spirits, and that's why the spirits are working with him, because he fully sides with the spirits, and so they like that. They kind of feel like, finally, a human who's focused on us rather than the affairs of humans, I suppose. And then the really kind of dark moment here is Furryfoot behind Jinora turns dark, and that's how she's kind of captured. So this is the big turn for Jinora. She can't stand against Unalaq, Wan Shi Tong, and other dark spirits. So this is the big turning point of the episode here. But some very cool stuff. I love the transition from Jinora just looking at a book into it being shown to us as the audience. I think that's really nice. But your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, no, I think this is a good sequence just to show sort of like, just sort of the up and down sort of part of her in this sort of sequence here of finding out the information, getting the sort of info dump here, them illustrating it, like you said, in a pretty good way that gets set across. I think, sort of feels like sort of the part of like sort of the wand part of it as well. So I think they did a good job of that. And then just sort of the final reveal of her sort of being captured in this situation and not being any way to get out of this. I think, especially seeing the transition of Furryfoot, is something that like speaks really sort of ominous of like sort of the situation that's going on here.
Mm-hmm. We then cut back over to the farewell between Iroh and Korra. I like the wording here where he's like, I hope to see you again in this life or the next. So he's very much like, I'm going to be like an immortal, basically. I'm assuming there's a possibility the next time I see you, it could be the next Avatar. And that's just an interesting kind of perspective thing that he has. It's just like, he's perfectly fine here. We still probably need to know is like stuff like, say, if Iroh chose to, can he like move on from here, or is he just kind of stuck like this until someone like attacks him or something like that? It's an interesting point. But Korra starts her journey with the bird spirit that's injured, and she encounters some dark Shishi or Shur spirits, whatever way you want to pronounce it. We know that because these are the spirits referenced in the Yang Chen novels. These were the ones that caused a lot of the issues on Yang Chen's first spirit trip into the spirit world. It's these exact spirits. So that's a really cool thing that we have the visuals for them from this episode, clearly showing where they got them from. But she stands up to them, remains positive, and they turn light again. The world goes back to being kind of light, and she manages to make her way to the top of Hyrule Peak. And so she delivers the bird back to its nest. There's a couple of other versions of the bird there. But interestingly, when returned, they combine together into this large dragon bird spirit. At the same time, Korra returns to her normal form, and she rides on her new bird friend to go after Jinora. So this is the, like Iroh said, if you help the spirit, you'll help yourself. The fact that she was so confident in how she did this, it fixed the issue that she had that caused her to become a child again. Really nice stuff. And the Yang Chen reference, I think, in regards to more recent content, I think is really, really cool that we have that. So big fan of this scene overall as the kind of spirit growth for Korra within the episode. But your thoughts?
Yeah, no, this definitely shows great sort of growth of her character of, being able to confront the other spirits and turn them sort of light, sort of understanding sort of helping spirits and how that can, in turn help herself as well. And, she gets a way to get to her actual location that she wants to get to. I think this is a great sequence of her sort of climbing this mountain. It's literally just, her journey as a character, even if they do sort of the quick sort of, zoom transition in the spirit world to sort of show her really quickly getting to at least sort of the base of the mountain here. I think they do a really good job of that.
So then, yeah, we have the final sequence here. Korra arrives at basically the Tree of Time area that also has the two portals. She moves to immediately close the portal that she opened in episode 2, but is stopped by her first kind of like in-person encounter with Vaatu. Just you hear the voice and she again immediately transitions over to speak to him. And it's cool because she knows who he is from like the backstory with Wan. But this is like her speaking directly to him, and it's always so interesting about this. Like Vaatu only ever refers to like the entire Avatar as just Rava, when it's kind of actually more the opposite in a way. It's more the human, and Rava's fine to just kind of be in the background most of the time. But he basically is just like, yeah, I don't think you should do that, Korra, because Unalaq comes out. He has Jinora captive, but not just that, she's nearly fully corrupted by dark spirit bending. I believe this is the first time we see it. We still don't know exactly what the result of this, but based on the threat that Unalaq gives, the implication seems to be if that you get fully dark spirit bent, it is like spirit destruction, like soul destruction, which is one of the few things that we ever get the reference to this, that like you can actually do that. Otherwise, spirits are meant to just be immortal in kind of all regards. So this is an interesting technique if that is in fact how it works. And so the threat here is like open the other portal, not just stop closing that one. Open the other portal or I will kill Jinora. It's a massive threat here from Unalaq. Her hand has been forced, so she has to open the other portal. We see it happen, but is immediately attacked by Unalaq. She doesn't have her bending, he does. Massive trouble here. Jinora gets taken away, so Korra can't even rescue Jinora, and it's only the dragon bird that actually manages to save Korra from being completely corrupted or destroyed here in this moment. So massive scene here. Vaatu, Unalaq, all here working together. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, no, this is, pretty like impactful. This is sort of the crux of the whole issue here. This is going to let Vaatu out of his, his prison in the Tree of Time here. So I don't know. It's definitely, I don't know. It's like, Korra really couldn't do anything else in this sort of situation here. I mean, granted, she wasn't really, prepared for this at all. Like she knew Unalaq was, out there to do stuff, but not that he would actually be here and be prepared in this sort of situation. It's definitely something she was not expecting to see at all. And, she's also just sort of like outnumbered, like, Unalaq with his sort of bending, all the spirits against her. I don't know if even if she were to try to be sort of more positive in this sort of situation, would she be able to sort of turn the spirits onto the light side here? I think, Unalaq just had too much of an advantage.
Mm-hmm. And do you have any thoughts on dark spirit bending, it being used in like the reverse way as we see here?
Yeah, that definitely is pretty sort of intriguing to see how he's doing it here. I mean, I guess it really just shows Unalaq's sort of, understanding of the technique that he's able to use it in sort of the I guess you would say the opposite way of how it normally works, although it almost seems like the result might, be just about the same here, but it definitely, visually, it feels like it's corrupting her soul here. Like this is, the end all to be all of her sort of character here. And, he tries to do it on her, as Korra as well here, but luckily she's able to sort of get free with the help from a spirit she helped out earlier. Because it definitely looks like it, wouldn't work out well in the end.
Yeah, because normal spirit bending, obviously it's like a energy adjustment thing. It goes for, you take darkness, turn it into light, and this is how you make a spirit kind of go off in peace. It is not described as like you're destroying the spirit. It's just you're kind of like pacifying it, and it will like return in the form that it was kind of currently in at like a later point. The reverse is kind of like you think it just turns them dark. It just adds chaos to them and activates their dark form. But I suppose this gets into maybe like the idea of like what even is the dark form of like a human spirit / soul. But the implication based on what he says is that like it is like I can destroy your soul. Like you're putting the soul of Jinora at risk here, and it's one of the few times we ever get that referenced. But yep, an interesting one. Who knows when we'll ever find out the result of that? That would be a very dark kind of moment in any Avatar story for someone to just be like absolutely permanently killed, like outside of any sort of reincarnation type stuff that's present in the series. But that's that. And so yeah, we get the moment where Vatu waits for Rava, and obviously with both portals open, the battle for the fate of the world is going to be fought. So this is what guarantees that basically happening. And then Korra wakes up and has to reveal to Tenzin that Jinora is trapped in the spirit world. She wasn't able to save her. Very emotional ending here, because there was a lot of confidence of like the two of them will be fine, we'll look after each other, and Korra has to return and be like, it didn't work out that way. And especially like Tenzin saying like, my little girl, it's like, ooh, it's a really big cliffhanger here, because otherwise like it's a relatively confidence inspiring kind of trip through the spirit world for both of them, even though they got separated. They both kind of accomplished stuff, but this definitely puts a big kind of negative note on the ending here. So what are your thoughts on how it ends?
Yeah, no, that is super negative considering everything that sort of happened in the episode, because it's, it feels like they almost didn't really, accomplish any of their really sort of goals, because Korra still doesn't technically know everything that she might should know. Jinora has that, and Jinora's completely sort of captured in her body still in the physical world, and that takes its toll on itself, as we see in the next sort of episode here. So this is, it's definitely sort of a shocking one in terms of like, you don't really know, at least if you only have this knowledge up until this point, what's going to happen in the future. And it definitely felt like they had so much leading into this episode from the last one, that it was going to turn out all right.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that is the ending of episode 10. And like I said, from this point on, we're into the kind of big finale episodes for book 2, where like the next episode is sort of like the finale for like kind of the brothers arc. And then we get into the big kind of bombastic spirit stuff in the final 3 episodes. So exciting stuff ahead there. But we will jump straight into the Avatar episode, which is 206, The Blind Bandit. So what to say about this one? Because I think most agree, like basically everyone agrees, this is a classic Avatar episode. It's many people's favorite episode, but I think pretty much most fans have it somewhere in like top 5. It's for sure a top 10 episode. I think everyone would pretty much agree with that. So there's very little kind of to criticize with this one, because it's just a hugely well regarded episode. Everyone knows what this is about. It's the Toph introduction. I don't really know what else to say before we get into the details, but your own initial thoughts here on this one?
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, this is a very well regarded episode. I think, it does a good job of, moving the story forward, as well as being just like a fun episode that Avatar has, with like a lot of sort of like in jokes that are either in universe or out of universe, into our own sort of reality. Like there's tons of references there, especially, if you're a fan of what they're sort of portraying in here. But even if you're not a fan of that sort of stuff, you can still get some enjoyment out of it, of how it's actually sort of portrayed throughout this sort of episode here. So I think it does a good job of just sort of, making fun of itself while still being entertaining and keeping things, lively and, not being too serious, full of itself.
Yeah, it's a great episode, because like it's the introduction episode properly for a to-be main character as of this episode. But it's just in general like really well written. Like the whole Earth Rumble element, like even if this was not the Toph introduction episode, just like an Earth Rumble side plot episode I think would have been fantastic. But the fact that it like interlinks with Toph's kind of introduction to the group is actually really strong, and it has the elements of like some of the other like strong, well-regarded episodes of like it's funny as well. There's pretty good character stuff here. It just like really gets it right overall. So let's get to going through this. So of course the plot heading in here is that Bumi is not going to be Aang's earthbending teacher, so he needs to find one. and it felt like this was locked in as Boomy. What are we going to do now? Like, where do we even start? The advice that Boomy has is find someone who like waits and listens before striking. So a little bit of a little bit more of a unique earthbender required here. And so the start here is basically, okay, let's do the basics. What about this guy? He's the earthbending master in the town. He runs a dojo. Aang attends the class. Doesn't work out because it's just meant to be, I suppose this is meant to be a kind of bit of a gag based on the whole karate dojo thing, and that it's more about like money and belts rather than the actual value of the martial art. And so Master Yu, while he's a good earthbender, doesn't necessarily seem to be the best teacher. That's not going to work. So what are your thoughts on the setup for this episode in the scene?
Yeah, no, I thought that was a pretty good way to go about it. I mean, because a logical sort of process would be, yeah, so like someone who has, experience and is a master, or at least considered a master, would be a good person to sort of teach, a student who's trying to be, perspective in whatever sort of discipline they're sort of interested in. But yeah, it definitely, it comes across pretty clear that, this is sort of the real world trope of, the martial arts, sort of teacher that's sort of, has more of like a factory of just sort of getting people in and sort of taking their money without necessarily sort of like instilling sort of the right sort of discipline in sort of their students here. Although, it seems like his other students are, reasonably-ish competent in sort of their abilities, although, they do get taken out by, Katara a couple seconds later, so maybe they're not as good as, we might sort of think they are. But, when we do see the master later on, he does seem reasonably good, but definitely feels like doesn't have the right sort of ideas in terms of actually running the sort of dojo here, and doesn't necessarily listen to his students. So I think that becomes pretty sort of clear and apparent here. And, I think Aang is already sort of keyed in on this.
Mm-hmm. And the other plot point we forgot there, very important. Sokka bought a bag for himself. Or does he buy it later? I forget the exact details. I think he has it and then he gets the belt and he's like, oh yeah, the bag matches the belt. I'm so glad I bought it. So yeah, he buys the bag.
Yep.
So then, almost immediately, they come out of Master Yu's and they hear about Earth Rumble, this earthbending kind of fighting event that's coming up, like the must-attend thing. People are talking about some of the fighters, and so Katara gets the information because the people who had it are being a bit rude to Aang, and this is a kind of recurring thing over the course of the episode of like, Aang's very friendly, but these kids are kind of rude to him, so Katara gets the information out of them. And so she finds out where it's being held, and they attend, looking for, obviously, some of the best earthbenders in the area. So this is our setup, basically, here. And the real world framing here is that, basically, they're attending a wrestling show here, but it's earthbending. That's the whole idea here. So we'll do the next scene as well. So the team sits down in what's revealed to be the very dangerous front row at one of these events, because you're right in line with the boulders that miss. As we see the main guy here kind of running it, Zinfu, announces this is Earth Rumble 6 and everyone to get ready. So it's really hyped up. Sokka becomes your stereotypical crazy wrestling fan here as he gets super into it. And it's a pretty simple thing in the Earth Rumble. Just earthbending with the aim of knocking your opponent out of the ring. So we'll get into all the wrestling references as we go forward here. But really cool and fun setup that, okay, this guy didn't work. Now let's see the weird earthbenders at this show. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's a fun way of sort of, showing a lot of, benders or earthbenders in a short amount of time, because otherwise how would Aang necessarily like find these sort of people? So the fact that there's this sort of like underground sort of event, literally underground sort of event, hosting these sort of people here, I think is it's a fun thing. It seems like something that could happen, and it does happen. So like I think this is a perfect way to sort of show this, and it does a good job of sort of I guess sort of splitting our sort of characters and their sort of personalities and their traits in terms of like which ones sort of are into it, which ones aren't sort of into it. So I like the whole idea and setup of this one.
And I think we probably have to have this discussion about Earth Rumble at the start. It's obviously referencing wrestling, and obviously the thing with wrestling is that it is scripted. Like the physicality, like is real, but like the results of it in the end are they decide who wins. Even watching this every time, I'm kind of like, is this meant to be scripted in that way, or are these actual real fights? Because obviously it seems like there's a bit of camaraderie, the fact that Zinfu can organize the entire like organization to come after like Toph and Aang. It kind of feels like they're in on this together, and it is meant to be this, but then it does feel at times like some of it is meant to be like it is just an actual fight. So like when does the wrestling analogy sort of like stop, I suppose? So what's your interpretation of that? Is it just real fights but they play more crazy characters, or are these actually planned out?
I don't know. I don't know. My feeling says this sort of like the bending that they're better on sort of like the improvisation side of things, and especially since they have to use their sort of bending and some abilities that they're, as far as like it being sort of like a one-to-one scripted, it's not sort of as laid out as that. Sort of, sort of like real wrestling in terms of like, they are physically, doing the stunts and everything. Like you can't be like a weak wrestler or a weak bender and, hope to actually survive, what they actually do here. But, it's more, I don't know, more freeform, I guess you could say. Like it doesn't feel like everything's one-to-one, but they, they definitely have their characters. They're definitely playing up various sort of things here. They definitely, know each other, well off, to sort of, be, in this sort of environment, this sort of situation here. But it definitely feels like it's more along the lines of just playing around with sort of the whole sort of idea of wrestling in general, even if it's not sort of trying to make it sort of as, I guess sort of soap opera-y as it could be.
So yeah, we see the first fight here. It's the boulder versus the hippo. And obviously the idea here is that the boulder is meant to be the, amazing baby face. Like the crowd loves this guy. They want him to win. He's sort of the fan favorite on his way to the championship type thing. The hippo is meant to be the kind of villainous kind of big guy who is more stronger than the kind of hero, but not as overall skilled. And that's exactly the way the fight goes. The boulder seems to be at a disadvantage because the hippo is such a crazy super heavyweight, but he fights back with skill and eventually does the kind of crazy like I'm actually stronger than him as well situation, and manages to push him out of the arena. So fun fight. This is where you see that like it isn't like we kind of talk about here, it's not exactly just a straight up bending fight, because there is still a lot of the pandering to the crowd, like the boulder very exaggeratedly, I'm off balance, I'm about to fall off the back of the arena. And the hippo is, even though he's like big and you would expect him to be slow, he's maybe slower than you would maybe expect anyone to be in terms of like allowing for the boulder's comeback. So it's an interesting one to look at that, but it's cool the way they portray basically bending wrestling, definitely. But what are your thoughts on the first match?
Yeah, I mean, they do try to sort of set up the sort of situation of good versus evil, or not good or evil, but just sort of like popular versus less popular in terms of these characters here, and I think that aspect comes across pretty clear in this episode, or this part of the sort of fight here. But definitely, I don't know, it feels like it works, like it's done sort of for laughs, and it sort of plays to sort of the crowd and environment, which I think is what they're sort of going for here. And you can see how Sokka's sort of getting into it.
Then we have a kind of montage as we get introduced to kind of like the other members of the roster. So we basically get a bunch of kind of wrestling stereotypes. So you have the sort of like masked luchador style kind of earthbender. You have the obvious kind of like foreign heel, like with the Russian Fire Nation accent, who's obviously meant to be the real kind of like enemy here. So Fire Nation Man, of course, is his name, even though he's an earthbender, is a fun kind of thing. There's a guy who's more focused on like, he's like, what's his name, Underminer or something like that. He's the kind of underground guy. and so on. And a lot of these are references to like real wrestlers. Like I think it's meant to be like one's meant to be like Rey Mysterio. The boulder's obviously meant to be The Rock. One of them I think is very clearly meant to be like Ultimate Warrior, stuff like that. It's a very cool, like really in-depth kind of wrestling kind of parody, but it's actually done quite well to the point where I think people really like Earth Rumble and want to see more of it. So cool stuff. But despite all these different people, Aang has not found anyone who stands out. He thinks the boulder's a little bit too focused on the strength and muscles, and no one else really stands out as having that kind of wait and listen style that he's looking for. And so I suppose next is the introduction of Toph. So any thoughts on the kind of montage there that goes through quite a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I like the montage. I think, even if you're not sort of like super into wrestling, I think there's, a lot to be had just from seeing sort of the interactions of the various sort of, I guess you could say, they're, villains towards our sort of like main wrestling hero here. So yeah, some of them is pretty obvious what they're sort of representing, and other ones you just sort of, get that sort of general idea that, this isn't a favorite from the crowd. And I think, Sokka's antics on the side, play into that very sort of well. So it gives you a clear indication of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So from there we get the introduction of the champion, because you'd think, oh, it's the boulder. No, he's the kind of up and coming kind of number one contender. The champion is the Blind Bandit, who is this young, small, blind girl. So she's incredibly confident. So they do everything they can to really portray the idea of like the kind of appearance versus what she's actually like. And she like insults the boulder, laughs at him, that this makes the boulder obviously like angry, and sort of flips the script a bit where like the boulder's clearly the face in all of these situations, and here it kind of is a little bit more even, and so he's the one who gets made fun of in this situation. But yeah, there's a few key points here. When Toph laughs, this reminds Aang of something he's heard before, his vision from the swamp, and so he's watching this one a lot more closely. The fight begins, it's a little bit more tense, and Toph does in fact wait and then strike as she completely dominates the boulder here, completely destroying him with very little effort. Then we get the kind of conflict kind of moment here. Zinfu offers gold to anyone who can defeat the Blind Bandit. Aang enters just because he wants to speak to Toph, but while he's dodging around with his subtle airbending, he does he just kind of defensively airbend Toph off the arena, winning the championship and the gold. So he accidentally wins and kind of embarrasses Toph here, and this is not a good start to the relationship. But what are your thoughts? This is the introduction of Toph here, but I suppose more the Blind Bandit character, but it is still quite a lot of Toph in.
Yeah, no, I think this gets, the personality of the character, across pretty clear here. I think, you get to see sort of her sort of techniques, understand sort of her, her abilities, just sort of how, overclass she is from, the other people that she's sort of fighting, or, at least this one sort of opponent here. And just, even if you don't quite sort of understand everything that they're actually doing here, because, you don't really sort of get the full explanation till later, you can see the reactions that she's doing and how, Aang is understanding, and, he might be one of the few that's actually able to sort of see how things are actually going down, sort of in real time here. So I think this is a really good way to sort of, introduce, this character and sort of how, how fun, how confident they are, everything sort of about them that, is part of their sort of like true character. And then later on in a couple seconds, we get to see sort of their hidden character.
Mm-hmm. And then I think not maybe as focused on as much, but just the idea that like it is this kind of wrestling organization, and the idea is that Toph is part of this and is strong enough, like, I guess, behind the scenes to become the champion and be respected in that way. Given that she's incredibly young and a girl, it's like, that's impressive, and that probably speaks a lot to her, like, the confidence of her character as well, and the contrast between, like, Toph Beifong and the Blind Bandit, basically, that we're going to get to as well. we more see this in later appearances from like the Earth Rumble characters, that they are actually like friends. Like she gets on well with the boulder and the hippo, when they're not doing kind of villainous things in this episode. But yeah, after the whole incident at the arena, Aang is trying to find her because he has chosen her as his earthbending teacher. They asked the boys from before about, like, do you know where she is, where she lives? They don't know anything. They honestly don't. But then Aang is like, hey, do you remember anything about this? And he describes the girl from his vision in the dress, and there's the whole flying boar situation. They reveal, oh, that's the symbol of the Beifong family, the richest family in town, maybe even the world. But, and this is a really key point, they have no knowledge of the Beifong family having a daughter. And so they're like, oh, well, the flying boar thing is a really obvious connection. Let's go check this out. So this is mostly like plot setup stuff, but I like the connection in with the vision. I like the introduction that she's actually from this like rich family. And then the really key detail of, like, you almost forget it because it doesn't get brought up. Toph mentions it, but not in as many words. The idea that most people don't believe there is a daughter as part of this family. That's very important. But any thoughts on that scene?
Yeah, I think, I mean, the way that he goes about sort of like finding it out and everything, I think it's a neat way, and shows sort of like the, sort of intimidation factor that, Katara has with that, which is always nice to see here. But yeah, it's interesting to see that, this character, Toph Beifong, is sort of like hidden from the world in a way. It's like she's been secluded, which I think, becomes pretty clear and apparent, sort of how or why that is sort of done in like a couple seconds when we get to the next scenes with we're interacting with her. But yeah, it's something, I mean, it's not like a complete like clear and like new derivative way on that sort of take of things, but I think, in this case here, the way that they've set it up, it works well for them sort of, making something that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be this sort of character that's, so strong in one arena and then so different in another arena.
Mm-hmm. So they immediately we actually get a middle scene here, actually. Yeah, the Boulder and Zinfu discuss what happened at the arena, and the Boulder's like, I saw it very clearly. Like, Aang did no earthbending, so he interprets it as that means the Blind Bandit took a dive, and like they're working together to split the money. That like kind of Toph has gone rogue here a little bit against the organization, and so this is where you see the Earth Rumble kind of like rally together because they feel they've been had here, as just a quick little scene. And this is where you see that the Boulder, he talks a bit more casually, but he still speaks in the third person, kind of like the Rock, of course, because that's who he's based on. So it's nice to see that. This is also where, like, the fact that he mentions, like, she took a dive, as if that's maybe potentially a normal thing that they do because they're not real fights. Who knows? But any thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, no, that was it's a nice sort of like small thing there, but that feels like so real that would be like a thing that would be discussed, because like they know, like, to some degree things are set up, and that, yes, she's still like the best out of all of them based on her sort of ability there, but the fact that there's some underhanded sort of dealings there, that's what they're really sort of upset with, not necessarily like how things actually sort of go down, as long as they're sort of keyed into the sort of things. Like, I'm sure if they knew she was going to take a dive or something like that, then they may have been okay with it, but I think they still probably would have had some issues with it regardless. But if she was good, she was just good. But the fact that there's something else going on, they can't abide by that sort of situation here. So that's sort of like the back end sort of dealings of wrestling that may or may not be happening.
Mm-hmm. Then we see Team Avatar. They are sneaking into the Beifong garden pretty quickly. They're just hit with an earthbending attack out of nowhere. Toph arrives, and yeah, we get the reveal. Yeah, she is in fact part of the Beifong family. And even though they explain some stuff like, hey, he's the Avatar, he needs an earthbending teacher, he wants it to be you, she's not interested in helping him. And she just straight away is like, I don't want any part of this. I'm like frustrated, angry with you because of what you did in Earth Rumble. She just calls for the guards, and they're the ones who reveal to us actually for the first time her name is in fact Toph. And we see this for the first time here, like the different side to her, that she acts helpless here around the guards. She's not showcasing her earthbending, or the fact that she explains it later, but like that she doesn't really have any problem getting around or anything like that, because she did just earthbend them out of nowhere just there. So there are questions after this scene, but you're like, what's going on here? This very much like she has two lives. Wonder what the other one is. So what are your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I guess, this is where you get to see that there's more to this character than we sort of thought there was before. And, I think, it's almost sort of like too presumptuous of like sort of our main sort of heroes here to think that, she would necessarily drop everything that she has going on to sort of help, train and, a person, the Avatar who, is, by at least by this current time standards, like the most important person in the world, and, has to deal with sort of the war effort and everything like that. But, they're also sort of like in this environment where, clearly they have a lot of money and they're secluded, and, things necessarily aren't the worst off for them, despite, sort of the world, or a lot of the world being in sort of turmoil here. So definitely feels like, this is sort of like the kids sort of trying to like go straight forward on sort of a topic, not necessarily, understanding the sort of the bigger pictures of things going on. Although, they do talk about sort of the war effort in a little bit more detail with the father in a couple more scenes here. But yeah, it definitely seems like they were trying to sort of get ahead of themselves in this sort of situation here.
Mm-hmm. And because Top's called the guards, they have to leave. But Aang is just like, I'm going to get back in. And immediately he uses his status as the Avatar to get an invite into the Beifong estate, which obviously frustrates Toph the second she hears about it. And so it's a great setup of like, these two are at odds with each other. Like, Toph kind of wants to get one over on Aang, but Aang kind of wants to do the same because of what happened in the previous scene. So they get kind of angry at each other as other discussions are going on. Like, Toph's father, Lao Beifong, does mention that, like, oh, hey, casually over dinner, how long do you think it will be before you, like, wrap the war up? He's very, like, casual about it, of just, like, and Aang answers very kind of, like, nonchalantly, of just, like, I hope to end it before the end of summer. It's just very official discussion here, even though, like, Aang is deeply concerned about how he's going to accomplish this, but that I guess that's how it goes overall. And this is fascinating because, of course, the gang has some suspicions about Toph, but they don't actually know that she's just hiding every aspect of herself from her parents. So Aang is just trying to be like, he's trying to like maneuver the conversation to gradually get to the idea of like, I would like your daughter to teach me earthbending. But she's constantly like, stop talking, and they're like fighting under the table basically. And eventually they just outwardly just blow up at each other, and everyone else is confused because they've just witnessed this almost like silent war happen, and they have no idea why these two are at odds with each other so much, because like the parents had no idea they've met previously, and then the rest of like the gang is just like, what just happened here? But they eventually then go out to talk alone together. But what are your thoughts on the dinner scene here with everyone?
Yeah, this is so, it's really funny. This is like such a classic thing to actually sort of see here, of like one not trying to be outed with their sort of like extracurricular activities, and the other side trying to sort of get them, to help them with a specific thing here. And so it's a fun scene to see it sort of play out here, and how everything's sort of, like you said, is sort of a silent war, a cold war that's sort of under the table here. And I guess he wasn't being very sort of like tactful. Like he could have done any number of like, airbending things that would have been way more subtle than what he actually did there. But I don't know. I mean, I guess, the cover up, sort of makes sense, but, it still feels pretty sort of obvious, at least from our vantage point here. But yeah, no, I think it was a nice sort of, back and forth that they had here, and how it sort of, eventually brings them together.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that night, like away from the parents, Toph kind of calls for a truce, and she and Aang like walk the gardens and talk alone together. So this is where she explains her abilities. I think everyone knows this speech here, but the whole idea that she is blind, but she can see with her earthbending by sensing vibration, and that's how it works. That it's so much so that it's actually better than sight, basically, because she can sense these tiny things like ants over there, and so it means that like she doesn't have to be visually aware of where things are, because she just has this sense, seismic sense as it becomes known as. But this is where we get the other reveal. Her parents don't understand, so she's basically kept her skill at earthbending hidden from them, and has, even though she doesn't like it, she's kind of been forced to, because of the kind of noble family situation, forced to just remain as the helpless daughter of the Beifong family. And so she has to just follow her kind of parents' wishes and basically be kept out of the way, be kept hidden, even though who she really is this completely different character who's actually like one of the most skilled benders in the entire show, and is actually this incredibly like confident and outspoken character. It's a big contrast. We get to that kind of here where she wishes that she had the freedom that like Aang and the team had. Aang offers her the chance to come with them, but she basically feels that she can't go because she'd be going against her parents, because she does still care about them, they are her parents, but she is frustrated about the situation here. But this is not the time for her to make her big, making her decision on her own situation. And before she can properly think about it, they're ambushed by the Earth Rumble roster and taken captive in metal cages. So very important scene where we get the kind of the real side of Toph here, a bit more of an emotional scene where we address a lot of the, can we explain some of this stuff? And we basically get it all here. It's a really well written scene that accomplishes quite a lot. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I think this is a very sort of like iconic scene. Like at this point, like if you know the character of Toph, you understand sort of these character traits and sort of this, her understanding of her, where she comes from, and how, she necessarily wasn't, upfront with sort of like her abilities, and rather, even if she was, would they really understand because of her lineage and her nobility that she sort of has here. So I think, it's a good way to sort of explain it to Aang, and sort of, he offers the hand of, come with her, but like, or come with him, but it's a different sort of situation. Like she has both her parents at this time, and that's sort of her sort of upbringing here is not the same as Aang or even of any of the characters in Team Avatar right now.
Mm-hmm. From there, Sokka finds the ransom note. The exchange is going to happen at the arena. They want money to give Toph back, but they don't really mention Aang. Lao asks for Master Yu to come with them. That's an important detail. And the basic idea here is that the exchange of like the Beifongs getting their daughter back happens no problem, but they're about to leave and just leave Aang there, because the Earth Rumble characters plan to hand Aang over to the Fire Nation for even more money. So that's a bit of a villainous turn for the Earth Rumble characters in a big way. Katara then appeals for Toph to help. Interestingly, like Lao speaks up and is just like, my daughter is helpless, she can't help you, she's fragile, and just every single word that could possibly like diminish Toph, he basically says it here. And so she like slaps his hand away, walks back in, and this is her standing up saying, no, I can help. And it's a huge moment. I think everyone remembers this one because she walks out, and it's not just that she will fight alongside Sokka and Katara. It's no, they're mine. Like, leave me to this. I will do this on my own. I will defeat the entire Earth Rumble roster single-handedly. And it's this just incredible scene that we'll go through in just a second here. But an interesting turn, of course, here. A massive villain turn for the Earth Rumble guys. Of like, you can sort of see, I suppose, why after this, a lot of them are like, wow, that could have been really bad. I don't think we wanted to hand the Avatar over to the Fire Lord or something like that. But what are your thoughts on the exchange scene?
Yeah, no, I wonder about that. If it's just sort of like, they're all together in this sort of organization, so they just sort of, see this advantage for this money, and, they just sort of want to take this. I mean, they already got, some money already, right? So they're just, are they being too greedy and trying to ask for more here and sort of put a damper in the whole sort of like war effort for the whole world. I mean, I don't know. I guess this is sort of like one of those things where they're sort of thinking of sort of short-term gains versus sort of the long term of how, things might work overall. But, they're wrestlers, so I guess maybe they're not sort of as concerned with that as, other people such as like the Avatar and Team Avatar would be. But yeah, no, it definitely, feels like this is the time for, Toph to begin to shine here. Like, even though it seems like this is a dire situation, it could, this is something that she can potentially sort of help with.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, we get into the action. So immediately creates this giant kind of like attack that kind of breaks up the ground, creates a dust storm. And it's such an impressive moment. She just steps into the storm because visually it doesn't matter to her. She can still see them. They can't see her. And it's just she appears before each of them, waits for them to attack her. She counter strikes, one gone. And you just kind of go through them one by one until eventually she gets to like the hippo and the boulder. And she takes those two out as well. She is really, really impressive. And, Sokka and Katara already know how skilled she is, but they're even more impressed. Toph's father and Master Yu are both like stunned by how amazing she is, with Master Yu even noting that like she is the best earthbender I've ever seen. And then we build up to Zinfu. He's like the promoter. Can he fight? He can. And he basically seems to be the most skilled of them all, as we get some of the most nicely animated stuff in the episode, which overall is still incredibly animated. Rapid fire earth kick combos, Toph blocks them and counter strikes herself. But then I suppose the big thing for him is that he's able to counter her counter. It's just that Toph counters his counter again and actually wins. I really like Zinfu's kind of move where he does the kind of flipping dodge and then sticks his hand in the ground as he's coming around. Because it would take most people by surprise, but not Toph. And I think that's a very cool moment. And yeah, she has cleaned house here. Incredible moment. And this resolves like the like action conflict of the episode. There's still some personal stuff we need to kind of address coming up, but what are your thoughts on this incredible earth-bending action sequence?
Yeah, no, this is really just to sort of illustrate how, awesome Toph is as a character, at least as far as bending goes. Because, yeah, just being able to single-handedly take all of them out, use, this sort of situation towards her advantage. Like, she's she is the aggressor here, but she, has the mindset to sort of, isolate them, sort of work on them sort of one-to-one, or, some of them in sort of like groups. So it's definitely, it shows a great showcase for skill, how she's, able to targetedly sort of export them from sort of the arena all in sort of the same location. Yeah, she's just, just shows her skill overall. And yeah, the Zinfu is definitely, I mean, I guess it's not too surprising that the promoter of the sort of, event would be sort of the most sort of like, maybe potentially the most sort of talented one, or, was the most talented one here. So yeah, I like that. That was definitely a good sequence because he made sure to sort of get all of his attacks up and early so that, there couldn't necessarily be any sort of quick counterattack, but, all Toph has to do is just wait a little bit more and she's able to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, we cut to sort of like the aftermath. So, of course, we need to address Toph talking to her father about like, oh yeah, you just saw this completely different side of me. Where do we go from here? I'll read the quote out here because it's quite important. She says, Dad, I know it's probably hard for you to see me this way, but the little obedient, little helpless blind girl that you think I am just isn't me. I love fighting, I love being an earthbender, and I'm really, really good at it. I know I've kept my life secret from you, but you are keeping me secret from the whole world. You were doing it to protect me, but I'm 12 years old and I've never had a real friend. So now that you see who I really am, I hope it doesn't change the way you feel about me. And you think it's going to be finally the parents will see sense, but they're like, it made me realize something. I've let you had far too much freedom. You will now be cared for and guarded 24 hours a day, and she'll have even less freedom than that. And it's this, like, we're talking about wrestling. This is the heel turn of the episode, basically, here from Liu Beifong. just doubling down on this despite seeing how supremely capable Toph actually is. And especially because for the most part, until like the comics, we don't really come back to this. It's like it is a proper turn for the father here, to have this all happen. But it's an interesting discussion, I think, to be had about this in terms of like, it comes back to the bit that we learned earlier on of like, they kept the fact that they had a daughter hidden, and the fact that they still want to keep her hidden, despite the fact that she's super, super capable, I guess just highlights that for them, they still feel like it's better to ignore the fact publicly that they have a daughter, regardless of this whole situation, and they still see her as always needing to be protected in some way, and that the mistake was giving her too much freedom when she already didn't have that much. It's quite a moment for Lau here. But what are your thoughts on this kind of key moment between kind of father, daughter, and mother a little?
Yeah, I mean, it feels very sort of like typical of the situation, which I think is sort of the key things of, the show overall, but this scene in particular, of just sort of the idea of the parents not necessarily understanding their children or their child in this sort of situation and what they're sort of capable of in this situation. Because, to us as the viewer, it seems pretty clear that Toph is like, the best, ever at this sort of thing here. I mean, even her master pretty much agrees with this, but the parents, they can only see what they want to see, or at least at this point in time. It takes quite a bit while for them to sort of come around, or at least the father to come around, when we see it in the comics here. So it definitely feels like, they play it up like it could work out well, but it doesn't quite get to that point.
Yeah, and that's the thing, referencing the comics, because for the most part, the show doesn't really address this topic of, like, as we'll discuss shortly, like, Toph leaves her parents. We tackle it minorly with, like, she's going to send a letter back to them, but we don't really address that. And then it's the Rift comic waiting for the kind of reaction to this. And it is interesting that Lau, it gets worse for him, where, like, he loses his daughter here, basically, but his behavior loses him his wife as well, because Poppy's not in the Rift, and that's still a bit of a open, lingering plot point. I think we know from like context from Korra that it seems like they get back together at some point, since I think they say that Sue was sent to stay with her grandparents. Now, I'm not sure if that directly was Lau and Poppy, but you could maybe interpret it that way. It's probably the logical interpretation of it, but who knows. So the comic stuff is really, really good, definitely, to add on to this, but we'll discuss that, I suppose, in a minute. So yeah, Aang can only watch on and, like, apologize that this has happened, and she's sad too that she kind of in a way doesn't get to go with them. But we then cut to the team about to fly away on Appa, and Toph arrives wearing what will be her normal outfit. She's ready to join them. She basically lies, and it's pretty clear it's a lie. She says her parents had a change of mind. They said I could go. And really quickly, she just defeats Aang, knocking him down, winning the belt back, and she's going to join the team, as we get the first sort of, like, Toph blind joke as Sokka throws the belt at her and she gets hit with it, of the kind of nuances of how her sight works. And then final scene is to double down on Lau as being a bit of a villain here at the end. He hires Master Yu and Xinfu together to go and bring Toph back by giving them a lot of money. So he thinks Aang has kidnapped Toph, and it's just him not listening to his daughter. So that's the big thing there at the end. But what are your thoughts on these last couple of moments in the episode?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see, Toph sort of join the group here. It's just sort of running away without, really sort of, I guess sort of making it super obvious, but, it's pretty clear what's actually sort of happening here. But I don't know. I think it's nice. It fits what they're sort of had to go here, and it plays into a couple other instances later on in the season in terms of how she actually did leave to actually sort of help Aang, and this is pretty much like what she's going to do for, the foreseeable future, because who knows what's going to happen later on with her as a character. So it's a pretty sort of brave thing to do, especially at this sort of age here. But it fits her character, right? Like, this is something that us knowing her and her personality, would just leave at this sort of situation here. And then yeah, seeing the sort of the idea that the Avatar has kidnapped the daughter, which it seems funny to sort of think of it that way now. But from the father's perspective, this he did come there with the intention of taking Toph in order to learn, but taking her nonetheless here. So I guess you could see his point of reference for why he thought it was he needed to put like a bounty essentially on his own daughter to bring her back.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that is the end of the episode. I think the final thing I do want to mention about it, though, is just the idea, like, it's an incredible episode. It's an incredible Toph episode, but it is one of the few, like, Toph-focused episode where, like, it really gets, like, into the core of her character. Toph, of, like, the main casts, kind of has the least amount of sort of, like, character arc episodes where you have the sort of fighting with Katara episodes, like, coming up in, like, the chase. The runaway then sort of ends up becoming the next really like big one. Otherwise, it's just like, it's cool. Like, metal bending is fantastic to see that advancement. Otherwise, it's more subtle as you see her slowly get used to being part of the group. But this is the core plot point set up, and it's the idea that like her issue with her parents. And it isn't resolved by the end of the series. It takes getting to the Rift comic to fix things with her father. And there's still probably a bit more that needs to be done there, mainly when it comes to, like I mentioned, how the mother comes back into things, if that in fact is what happens. They never really came back to the whole, let's send a letter home. Like, Katara writes the letter for Toph in the Runaway to send back, and what happened there. It's just one of those interesting ones where like there was really clear setup. Like, you almost forget just how like, oh yeah, like Lau really loses it a little bit at the end of this episode with how much of a kind of villain to a certain degree he becomes in terms of just like not listening to Toph and doing things in the worst way possible. But what are your thoughts on that, sort of in a way, the follow-up to the potential of the amazing debut of Toph?
Yeah, I mean, I do get what you're saying as far as like the character not having as many sort of focused episodes. I mean, the show, it does have its moments here and there for each of our characters where they get a little bit more sort of, not necessarily solo time, but, more direct, development on their character. And Toph, I guess, as being the fourth member of the group, definitely gets sort of the least of it. I guess, they're trying to sort of bank on the idea that, she was sort of this strong character overall. But, like you said, they do put things there where, we would be curious to find out sort of what was the sort of final resolution with her parents and sort of, her development overall. I mean, not to say there's even more if you go into core and sort of like how her kids and everything like that. So there's always more that there could be about any character, but for Toph specifically, they did set up some things that we would be wondering sort of what happened with them, and maybe that's something that's coming up in the new sort of things that are on the horizon potentially. So maybe there is still time to sort of fill in those things, because I think for any of the characters, especially our main characters, people would be very interested in finding out that information, even if it is all these years later.
Yeah, like my thing with Toph is just that, like, I just wish there was maybe even just one more episode where she was a little bit more of the direct focus, whether it be the stuff with her parents or some other kind of different dynamic. But it's such a well liked episode. I think most people are fine with stuff like the metal bending development, the few kind of episodes where she's fighting with Katara and other bits and pieces along the way. That, yeah, like, there's always going to be a thing when you have 5-6 characters in a group where not everyone has the Zuko level of character arc necessarily, in the same way that, like, Sokka's arc is not as like crazy out there as like what Aang goes through, what Zuko goes through. So that's just that point. But yeah, they're the reviews for today. Next review podcast is going to be obviously K211 Night of a Thousand Stars for Korra, and then 207 Zuko Alone for Avatar. So another 2 good episodes. I'm actually really excited to discuss the kind of more or less the end of the kind of Bolin Mako kind of Varric plot. Like there's other stuff that happens, but the core of it happens here in this one. I'm excited to discuss that. And then Zuko Alone. It's always great to go back to that one, especially because we have extra context to it from the comics as well now. So that should be fun. But your thoughts on those 2 episodes up next?
Yeah, well, Zuko Alone, I mean, that's like an iconic episode for, a character's sort of progression and their sort of growth here. But yeah, even Night of a Thousand Suns, I think, that's fun just because of what sort of happens to Bolin. As a character, even if it isn't sort of like super huge on the grand scheme of things there, but it also just sort of moves things forward in terms of the plot overall, being back in the city and stuff like that.
But yeah, that has been episode 267 of the Avatar Online podcast. Yeah, we hopefully will be back in probably a couple of weeks. Like, I assume when we get the main trailer, we might want to do something then, depending on when other news happens. So it'll probably be like 2-3 weeks, maybe the full month for the next podcast. But for now, that has been it. We will be back once again for 268. But it's been myself and Greg for this one. Thanks for listening, and bye.
Bye-bye.